here talk about the mental side, of course, of not only baseball, but sports in general, and a little bit of your experiences with it and what it means to you. But when you hear the terms, sports psychology, mental side of being an athlete, the mental game, what's kind of like the first things or first couple of things that really pop into your head?
Um, well, being an athlete, right off the bat, I feel like that's a loaded thing when it comes to the mental side, because when the mental side gets in the way, you kind of lose that athlete, just natural giftedness that each of us have, and whatever we decide to go into that we're good at. And I think one of the biggest things that people do is kind of get away from the fun kid kind of aspect in ourselves. And then that's when you kick in the mental side, where it actually starts affecting kind of like just being an athlete and enjoying what you're doing. Because, you can talk to any athlete across all sports, and every one of them will tell you that as soon as they start thinking, they stop being an athlete. So, and it's so crazy because, everything that entails you going out there and being successful, it's kind of like when you dig a little bit deeper, like in the midst of like the high pressure actual games, what it entails you to be able to accomplish what you want is literally you turning your head off.
Which is a lot harder than it's not easy. It's easier said than done, I guess.
Oh yeah, of course. And it's something that is not like, when you look at any sports, you're going to have mechanics and physical movements that you need your body to do in order to accomplish whatever it is that you're doing, whatever sport you're doing. But when it comes to those movements, you can clean up and you can work on it, you can get it, and you're good. Like, you have to obviously continue to do whatever drills and stuff. I feel like the mental side is like, you never really quite get it. It's always like something that like you're always like striving after, because it's such a hard concept to really get. Like, you get certain aspects that which obviously allows you to be successful, allows you to like slow the game down and be in the spot that you need to be. But at the end of the day, like, the mental side of it, like, you never really get it, because your mind is so unique. It's always trying to play games with you. And when you understand that, it honestly takes a little bit of pressure off of yourself, because it's like, okay, like, I'm never really going to quite get this, but I know I can do enough to where I can put myself in the best position to be able to do what I need to do for this hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And beyond that, it's just, you have to really, really work at it.
How do you work at it day to day, week by week, month by month? Is there something that you kind of incorporate in your routine or in season, off season training where you really focus in on the mental piece?
For me, it's really like, it's taking what you're going through like during the season. Like, the off season is easy because it's a lot more controlled. It's no different than like when you're training. So like with baseball, you get in a cage and you have a very controlled environment. You're doing a very controlled drill where you're focusing on one thing. And, it's very simple because there's not, X, Y, and Z that you have to worry about. It's just X. It's just, this is it. This is what I'm focusing on. And there's nothing else going on. Where like and that's the off season, where like opposed to in season, you have, you're obviously trying to perform. So that has all of its added pressures and added everything that goes into that. But you also, you're on the team schedule, you're on the trainer schedule, you're on the strength coach schedule, you're on your own schedule because you have things that you want to do to get done. And it's just like all of these different things while you're trying to gear up to get ready for 7:00 first pitch to be able to go out there and be successful. So it's a lot of stuff all packed into one day. And baseball, you're doing it every single day for 7 months. So like the off season is very easy. It's very easy because you have your routine and everything's very, very controlled. So like it's just the mind almost goes in cruise control because, and you're obviously not trying to, you obviously have things you want to accomplish, but you don't have to worry about waking up and facing 97 and getting 3 hits today. Where in the season is where you really, really work from the mental side. And it's kind of weird when you think about it because you think like, okay, I want to make sure that I'm ready when I go into the season. You're ready. Like your mind is where, you understand where your mind needs to be, but the actual mental reps of it is during the season because it's as you're going through it. You're being aware of how your mind's working and where you're at mentally each and every day to make sure, reiterating like I was just saying a couple minutes ago, making sure that you're going out there and you're in the best position to be able to accomplish what you need to accomplish. And it's just every day's a new challenge. Every day's completely different. Every day's brand new with whatever that mental side of it you have to deal with. And it's just going through that in season of really understanding how and what you need to do to get you to where you want to be.
That's the thing that I really love about the mental piece in terms of maybe from a nerdy perspective of it, that you kind of have to really go through it to understand A, what it means, and B, to develop it. I don't think it's something that you can necessarily kind of work on outside the scope of the situation. You almost have to throw yourself into those situations and
exactly because you got to see how you react. Yeah, you have to see how you react, how your mind reacts, what you're thinking about, and when you hit the floor, because it's going to happen, and it's going to happen a lot, especially in the game of baseball, is how are you going to react to it? Because, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir to everybody that is understanding of baseball. So, like, you fail so much. And, like, the only other sport I can really compare it to that is so mentally just draining is golf. And, like, you're so beat down at so many points throughout the season because of just how much you get knocked on your butt, that it's such an important aspect of the game. Like if you don't have something going on mentally that's working, you're going to drive yourself into a ditch and you're going to be stuck there, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. I like there how you alluded to, you kind of compare it to golf, and you have to kind of be so mentally on the ball, because I think mental fatigue is one of those things where it's tough, I think, at first glance to really grasp what it means, because you can't see mental fatigue necessarily. You can see the byproducts of mental fatigue, but with your own eyes, I can't see that you're fatigued right now or I'm fatigued. You can see physical fatigue. You can measure that, but you can't necessarily measure that mental fatigue. So
100%. Yeah, the mental side of it, it's almost like a mystery.
When you think back to your baseball career so far and compare yourself maybe 4 or 5 years ago, or maybe your time starting at LSU to now, where do you feel like you've kind of grown the most when it comes to the mental side of things?
Meaning like at what point, or like you meaning like at a certain point?
Or like just generally, like, is it confidence, attitude, whatever, that we can get into the specifics of the actual events that led up to it. But like,
yeah, honestly, I mean, if I'm speaking from just my entire, so I've always had, it's really funny, and I'd actually be curious to talk to other athletes to see if it's similar, which if I had to assume, I would say it is very similar. There's like stages of my career that have always been very repetitive. So when I got to high school, so as a freshman in high school, first time being in high school, I had a little period of like almost like doing too much and honestly like sucking for a little bit. And then realizing, like, hitting a point where, like, the light switch goes on, like, I belong here, like, I'm really freaking good. And then the rest is history for high school. And then transition to college, and I get to college in my freshman fall, had such a bad freshman fall that when I came back after Christmas break, all of the coaching staff were surprised that I even showed back up. They all thought I was going to transfer because of how bad it was. And when I came back,
that's a far fetch from who you are today. Now, when thinking back at it, right?
So, but it goes into today, and I'll get to that in about 30 seconds. So I get there freshman year, and I'm just absolutely horrible. Like, just the transition process is just really bad for me. And I show back up, and they all think I was going to transfer. And we get ready for spring ball before the season even starts. So about 2 months. And I was the best. Once I came back, I was the best player there, and I ended up being a freshman All-American that year. And so fast forward to professional ball, so pro ball, and I get to finally get my foot in the door and get to the big leagues. And I feel like I'm back at that stage again, where like I've gotten a cup of coffee, and it's been like that same kind of process of like, man, like things aren't really going my way. And it's kind of at that point where it's like, okay, like the light switch is going to turn on here, and then the rest is going to be history. So that's where like the mental side is like such it's really hard to put into words. It's like you understand like what you need to do, where you need to be from a mindset. So like you can go back to the steps that I just explained through my career, and those aspects in each step. And it's like, okay, like I'm in that one now, the last one I just explained, and I've gotten to the big leagues. I have every capability to be an everyday big leaguer and be just as good as anybody up there. And I've been in this stage 3 times now, where I'm transitioning into that next level. And it's like, I know where my mind needs to be, but yet it's still a battle. It's still a grind, even though I've been here before, just in different transitions of my career and of the game. And I think that just goes hand in hand with what you were just explaining, that it's like, you just don't have like a set thing here or there that you work on. It's the experiences, and it's going through it, and it's using it to what you understand. Like, and everybody's different, so everybody's mind is different. So like someone might process through and work things through mentally different than I am through these steps that I just explained to you. And so like for me, like I need like the stage I'm at right now, this very instant of that last transition into the last step that I have to take in my career, because there's nothing higher than the big leagues. I need to get myself kind of reference back to those 3 different stages of the same exact transition that I'm going through now. Think about what I did. So using those experiences and now applying them to where I'm at mentally now. And really it's a trust factor. It's really you understanding that like, okay, I've been here 3 times before. I'm going to go through it again. I'm in it now. Trust it. I know what my mind needs to do because I've gone through it 3 times. So now let's just trust it and let's keep moving forward. And like you slowly start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And once you hit that light, the rest is history. Just like high school, the rest was history. College, the rest was history. And I get to pro ball. And now, once I get all, through that tunnel and get to the light on the other side, now you're going to see that same thing that's happened 3 times before.
There's obviously, when you go through those major career transitions from one level of play to the next, there's like a million things that are changing. But thinking back at it, are there 1 or 2 pieces of that transition that stick out that may have been the hardest to cope with or the hardest to deal with?
I mean, by far I would say between transitioning to college and then now transitioning to the big leagues, those 2.
Yeah.
Because you got to remember, I came from a Northeast high school that wasn't very good competition. I played 16 to 20 games in a high school season, and then I immediately transitioned into one of the top baseball programs in the entire country.
Which was more down south, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with like the high school American systems up here in Canada, but like you mentioned playing 16 or 20 games like Northeast. What would be like in the elite programs, like a lot more games, I'm assuming.
Yeah, the elite programs. So like if you have big high schools across the country that play national schedules, so travel all over the country, and they'll play anywhere from like 50 to, it's like almost like a college season, like 50 to 60, and I was playing 16 to 20.
As a young kid, I mean, I think it's tough enough being an athlete in high school, dealing with expectations and whatnot. But what you described there, like being in the elite high school programs, I mean, I can't even imagine myself. I mean, I guess you could tell me better than I could just explain for you, but the amount of pressure that you could feel at that much of a young age, I think, I mean, I don't know what the type of mental coaching or sports psychology support was available at that time, but I'm hoping that as the years go by and more awareness is brought to the mental side of the game, that people realize how important it is, especially at such a young age.
Yeah, no, it is. And like those transitions are so big, and that transition and this transition to the big leagues has been very, very, very similar in the way that my mind is kind of processing through everything. It's very, very similar. And it like, and the mental side as far as coaching and that is getting a lot better. It's becoming a very big focal point across a lot of sports. And I know obviously I can speak for baseball more than any other sport, but baseball is taking very big strides in making it a very big focal point in the development of players, and not just getting to the big leagues, but having that in the big leagues, because even once you're in the big leagues, you're still developing, you're still learning, you're still growing. And so, but at the end of the day, like, you know, from my opinion, like you can look to as many people as you want, but at the end of the day, you yourself have to understand how your mind works. You have to understand like what you need to do, what you need to tell yourself, how you need to put yourself into different situations and process through those decisions well beyond before you ever talk to anybody, because you talking to somebody even not understanding how your mind personally works is kind of a waste of time. Because you could talk to that person for an hour or two, but you know, you still have the other 22 hours that you have to process through stuff through the day. And especially in sports, because once you get in the game, you know, it's you out there. You're the one getting in the box. You're the one going out in the field. You're the one that's on the base path. You're the one that is, you know, walking back to the dugout after an at bat and you just struck out. Like, you're the one that's doing it. So at the end of the day, those people are extremely vital, but first and foremost, you have to have at least a decent understanding of how you yourself are going to process through things. And what I think, honestly, from the coaching side, from baseball in general, not just the mental side, but coaching in general, I think could get a lot better in the aspect of really trying to understand players a lot better in how they process through things, because a lot of guys are very different. And when I know as a player, when you have a coach that's invested into learning, you know, how you are as a person and how you process through things mentally, it makes a world of a difference. One of my favorite coaches, I only had him for about, what was it, like 2 or just under 3 months when I was in Arkansas in AA in 2019. Our head coach there, Mitch Canham, I met him, so I got traded to the Mariners. I met him in that spring training, and then I played for him for those 3 months, and then he ended up getting a head coaching job at Oregon State. And so I was only around him very little. Like, I met him, he coached me, and then he was gone. And it was such a short period of time, and he was by far my favorite coach that I've ever played under. And it was because he was so invested into learning how you work through things, like how your mind processes through things. Because as a player, like when you see a coach, let alone a head coach doing that, like it allows you to kind of relax a little bit and really feel like someone's on like your side almost.
They got your back, so that even if you mess up, they're not going to.
Yeah, but and also like when you do mess up, because it's not a matter of if, it's when you do mess up and when you do fail, he knows how to approach you to get the most out of you. Like I could be a type of person that I want you to mother F me and get in my freaking butt like 24/7 if that happens. Whereas like another guy might be like, hey, I need to sit down in the office and like be calm and look at video and process through things. Like every guy is different. And if you're doing that to a guy that doesn't necessarily process through whichever route you decide to take as a coach, like that player is not going to respond. That honestly, it's going to hurt him even more than it's going to help him. And so again, that's where it kind of comes to understanding how you process through it and how you go through the mental game, because when you understand it, then it's better for you to vocalize it. And now you guys can start working together on how to work through those things.
I love that a lot, man, because obviously I think every athlete and every person in the world is unique. Like no two athletes have the exact same games played at the exact same college, exact same stats, exact same minor league stint. Like every player has a very unique situation in terms of their baseball career. And not only that, but their life outside of baseball, their life outside of sports, all those influences. So I really love how you mentioned there the importance of coaches taking an individualized approach to their players and getting to know them one by one and what works for each. Because I think when you think about the mental side of sports, I mean, there's obviously a couple things that maybe are complete red flags in terms of the mental approach, but generally I don't think there's one way to do anything. How you might deal with things, like you said, works for you. Just because that doesn't work for somebody else doesn't mean that's the wrong way to do it. Like everyone's got to find their way to deal with it. And I think great coaching is one of the ways to actually find that answer.
Yeah, 100%.
The 2020 season obviously is wrapped up a bit now, but obviously one of the most unique seasons in sports. And I think from a mental perspective, also one of the more unique situations in sports. When you think back to the season that just happened, I know you had a couple games there with the Mariners. How do you feel like you kind of handled it mentally? Looking back at it, are you happy kind of? Because it's obviously was a huge change to everybody, but if you kind of give yourself a bit of a grade on how you kind of dealt with things mentally, how would you kind of rate that?
Very poorly. It was very bad. It was a very, very big mental, one, eye-opening for myself, and two, again, just learning. As athletes, that's the number one thing, is learning, especially if you want to play for many, many years. Mm-hmm. This year was, from the mental side, it was kind of like two stages. It was, for me at least, the whole quarantine and not knowing what was going to happen. And for a good bit there, like, it wasn't look like anybody was going to play. It wasn't look like baseball was going to figure it out, with the amount of that us and the PA were going back and forth with each other about numbers and money. So like right there, that was square one, that like I myself had such a hard time staying like in a place mentally that I needed to be in order to ensure that I was ready to go whenever they told us to. I did like such a bad job at that. I kind of like rode that wave of what everybody was saying, where it was yes and no. Yes, we're going to play. No, we're not. Yes, we're going to play. No, we're not. And I rode that wave instead of just staying kind of like at the same level. Just if they say yes, I'm ready to go. If they don't, then let's go home. Like, and that was number one. And then number two, once the season actually started, what happened to me this year, with the way that things were handled, as far as decisions that were made with myself and everything that happened this year, I realized how much I relied on so many different people, including the organization itself and what people were saying about me, that I never knew how much I relied on it until this year. And it was such a great experience. Now, look, obviously fast forwarding to where we are now and looking back on it, I'm very grateful for it, because it kind of brought me back to kind of the basics and square one of why I've gotten to where I've gotten to in my career, and why I've gotten there so quick. I'm only 25 years old. I have a lot of years of baseball left in me. And realizing that, I got there because I knew how to do it. I knew what I needed to do every day. I knew what I needed to do when I got in that box. I was the one in that box and not anybody else. And it didn't matter what anybody was saying. It didn't matter what was going on around me. Like, I knew what I could do when I stepped in there. I knew the work that I put in to get to me stepping in that box and being ready and ready to go. And beyond that, nothing else matters. And I feel like I kind of got away from that. And this year really helped me to kind of reel myself back into understanding that, like, I've gotten to where I've gotten to in my career so fast because of that. And I kind of lost that. And this year kind of helped me reel that back into understanding and kind of going back to those basics of, like, I'm really good at what I do and I'm here for a reason. And I'm going to be here for many years because of that. And it's going to be solely because of that. It's not going to be because of what, you know, Ted and Billy and Bob and everybody's saying about me, or what organization is saying or not saying about me, like, or the people around me, the team around me that I have, from my strength coach to mobility to hitting, like all of these things, like all of the staff with the Mariners, like, I don't care what anybody has to say. Like, I'm the one that's stepping in that box, and I've gotten here for a reason. I've gotten here because of what I've done and what I know I can do, and that shouldn't change. And so for me, those two aspects were really just, again, I'm very grateful for that I learned this year. Was it extremely hard and just absolutely sucked going through it? Oh my gosh, 100%. It was horrible. But again, you know, fast forwarding to where we are today and then looking back on it, I'm extremely grateful for it.
I love that a lot, how it sucked going through it, but now you're kind of looking back and you're grateful for it, because for an athlete to reach that next level, you have to go through the fire. You have to go through the adversity. You can't, I mean, I would think in the moment, any athlete would kind of take the easy way out, you know, all sunshine and rainbows for the season. But like you said, if you had that experience where it wasn't as adverse, you wouldn't have this realization that you have now of how important everything is. I think, well, I guess one of the questions I love to ask athletes, because the topic of adversity comes up a lot, of course, during these podcasts, is I think for a lot of younger athletes, especially, they fear adversity. They fear kind of taking that first step into challenging themselves or to seeking out the truth that they might not be good at something. But what kind of advice would you give for other athletes out there, the younger athletes, of course, where, again, they're scared to take that step to challenge that adversity?
Yeah. I mean, the number one quote that pops in my head is, you know, the one that talks about, I don't know if I'm going to get it word for word, but where it talks about, you know, you're going to miss every single shot that you don't take.
Yeah, 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah, you have to put yourself out there. And as an athlete, the number one thing that drives us is the competitiveness. And so that competitiveness inside of you is, you know, I mean, that's the very reason why you love to play, because you want to be the best. You want to go out there and show everyone that you're better than, you know, everybody else that's out on that field with you. And the only way you're going to do that is you have to take the risk of going out there and failing.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the cool, and I always tell everybody this, that I know for 100%, it won't change. I don't think it ever will in my mind. I think the one thing that I'm going to miss the most when I'm done playing is failing and then figuring it out. Like, there's no better feeling than getting knocked on your ass and then having to get back up, analyze, work at it, figure it out, and then seeing you flip that and turn it into success and actually works now. Like, there's nothing better than that. And the only way that you get that feeling is by going out there the first time and failing. You know, you're never going to have that feeling, and you're not going to have that competitive edge if you're afraid to do that. So for just the pure competitiveness of it, man, you got to go out there and you just got to let it rip. And if you fail, you fail. But again, you know, if you don't go out there and do it to begin with, then you're never going to know how good you really are.
In terms of you describing there a kind of failing and reanalyzing and then winning, quote unquote, and then that feeling so good, are you referring like there to those transitions that we talked about earlier and how rewarding that felt, or like more specific mechanical things
100%.
in baseball?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's there's no better feeling, because I mean, you talk to any athlete and you have everybody has their own opinion, especially now with the way social media is. Everybody knows everything about everybody, and when it comes to sports, no matter how good you are, no matter how good of something that you do, there are always hundreds of thousands and millions of people that think you suck and think you don't belong to be there. And not just strangers, but there's also people that are involved closely with whatever you're doing in your career that think the very same thing. And that's never, ever going to go away. You are never going to please and have the positive opinion on yourself with everybody. That's never going to happen. So you yourself just need to just push all that aside. Like that transition, like I was talking about, like being in those moments and knowing that there's so many people that are just like, like this kid's just not going to work out, or, he's not going to stick around here very long. And then flipping that around, not listening to it, not even paying it, not even turning an eye to it, and then flipping it around and proving yourself to be one of the best that are out there. There's no better feeling. And when you're done playing, you're going to remember all of those moments far more than just the average, day-to-day stuff that you think you would, because those things were the biggest things that molded you into who you wanted to be. When I look back on it in 10 years, when I played, 10 years in the big leagues and I'm 35 years old, I'm going to look back at all of those transition moments and be like, man, I could have just given up so easy. But I knew that I had something in me. I knew I had more in me to be able to bust through that wall, because I knew that I could stick around there. I knew I was one of the best. And the fact that you stick to yourself with that, and you have the grit and the mindset to do that, and then you see it through, there's nothing more rewarding. Nothing, absolutely nothing.
It's amazing how motivational the mind can be. I mean, these aren't like physical, tangible things that you can kind of hold to motivate you, right? This is all you in your head motivating yourself to get better. I think, like, it always blows my mind, just that connection between the mind and the body, and just how powerful the mind is to motivating somebody to just push themselves to their limit. And kind of reminds me when I train right now in sports or at the gym, play tennis, whatever it is, I always think to myself, like, if I feel like I'm going to give up or I want to give up, I remind myself there's probably somebody out there that is working harder than me. So I got to make sure I'm kind of working as hard as them so they're not getting past me, right? That's always my motivation too, of not letting anybody outwork me and just putting up my 110% effort. And, sometimes you fail even if you do 110%, and that's okay. Because like you said, especially in a sport like baseball, failing it's natural in the sport. So not necessarily so much outcome focused, but being process focused, always putting your best foot forward, 110% effort, all the cliches. But I think that's the mindset that a really successful professional athlete needs to have.
Oh, of course. I mean, you put it in such a perfect way. When Michael Jordan talks about, you talk about Michael Jordan, you're talking about,
GOAT.
The best of the best of the best. Like, literally, if you take a basketball player and you're like, how do you want your career to end up? Everyone's going to be like, exactly the way Michael Jordan did it. Literally, there's nothing better. But yeah, Michael Jordan still talked about it when he said that he would take all of those negative thoughts and those negative opinions that people would talk down on him about, and he would just take it as a log and put it in his fire. And like, you're talking about the greatest basketball player to ever step foot on this earth, and he still had people that were talking bad about him and thought he sucked, this, that, and that. And he thought of it as, I'm going to take it and I'm going to throw it into my fire and make it bigger. And you have to use all of that. You have to take it and use it. You take it, use it, and run with it.
Yeah, I love that. He almost like he's embracing the hate. He's embracing the negative thoughts.
Of course.
That's awesome. One, I forget what the actual date or name of the interview was, but I was reading back a couple of your past interviews, and you had talked about how, I think you were talking about, these turning points in your career and really finding your groove and stuff. And you're saying how your identity is no longer like kind of within the game of baseball, but outside of it. I don't know if you remember that quote specifically or that interview, but I always love talking about this topic on the podcast because I think a lot of athletes out there, they identify as an athlete. So when things are going great as an athlete, like that's awesome, of course, like you're feeling really good. But as soon as something goes wrong in your athletic career or athletic game, whatever it is, your whole life kind of crumbles around it. Just want to kind of gather a couple of your thoughts on that and just kind of how you maybe have navigated through that process. Because I think a lot of athletes struggle with that.
Yeah. Well, I talk about that as much as I can, in as many interviews as I can. I'm a believer in Jesus, and so like when I talk about my identity is in who Jesus says I am, not in who all of these different people are. And this goes directly into what we were just talking about what everything that encompasses your career and whatever sport or whatever you're doing in your life, what all of these people say you are, because everybody has their own opinion of you. Everybody is going to throw their opinion at you. But at the end of the day, my identity is never in this game. It's in who Jesus says I am. And for that, in baseball, I love talking about this. I love using this guy as an example because it wasn't that long ago that he retired. When you're looking at, just the retrospective baseball itself, like Chipper Jones. And when he was one of the best to play, Hall of Famer, unbelievable baseball player. Since he has retired, it is very rare that you hear baseball talk about Chipper Jones anymore. You obviously hear them talk about it in certain aspects of it because it's Chipper Jones. But in the day-to-day of what's talked about in the game of baseball, you very rarely ever hear Chipper Jones anymore. But yet he was one of the best of his generation, if not the best of his generation, to play the game of baseball. And I think as athletes, we get so lost in, I want to be the best, I want to be the best, I want to be the best. But at the end of the day, you forget that one day it's going to end. And it's going to be different for everybody. You can go on and play 10, 15, 20 years like Chipper, or you could play, your career could be over tomorrow for whatever the sake may be. So having that thought and that aspect, you quickly realize how hollow this game is, or any career, any game, or any sport that you want to put into that category. You quickly realize how hollow it is, and how if you are that person that's putting every ounce of you, meaning your identity and who you say that you are, the very essence of who you are, whenever that is taken away from you, it's going to absolutely crumble you, because you were literally just snatched away from you the very thing that made you who you were. And so for me, obviously, like I said, I'm a believer in Jesus. So when I look at just the identity of who I am, I want to place that in the very thing that is never wavering, that is more full than any aspect of life that we can attach to or think about, or whatever you want to put into that. And so when you look into that, I have conversations all the time with people who are not believers, who are atheist, agnostic, because I love talking about my faith and just talking about the gospel. I absolutely love it. I love having great conversations with everybody. And one of the biggest things that a lot of people don't realize is, and I'm going to go off a little bit, same category, but off a little bit, and then come back to what I was just talking about with the identity of Christ in baseball. A lot of people just get away from it, and they realize they think that, like, well, how can I believe in this fairy tale? How can you believe in something that just has no weight behind it? And it's just so crazy how ignorant those people are, because when you come to the gospel itself and who Jesus says he is, there's no piece of historical evidence in the creation of time that we have on paper, like as evidence of any type of writing or any type of historical evidence that we have that is more accurate than the gospel. And it's so funny how it's just so contrary to what a lot of these unbelievers think, that they think it's just so false, like it's fairy tale. But yet you believe in so many different things, of pieces of history that don't even come close to the historical accuracy that the gospel has. It's crazy. But if you just do the research and look into it, like, and the one piece of thing that I like to use all the time, you can use anything from archaeological, which is crazy, to actual physical stuff. But when you look at, it's called the Creed, and I'm pretty sure it's 1 Corinthians, and it's a piece of scripture, and it's like 6 or 7 verses, and it's right when Jesus resurrected from the dead, and he was showing himself to some of his disciples and followers. And I don't remember exactly how many people it was, but it was a handful of people within those 6 or 7 verses. And that very specific pieces of verses, its original manuscript compared to the actual original piece of writing from those verses can be dated from the original writing of it to the first manuscript within 100 years. So within one generation of people. The next closest piece of historical evidence that we have like that from the original piece of writing, and I'm talking about historical evidence across every aspect of life that we have, from the next closest with the original writing to the first manuscript is like, it was like 1,500 years or something. But yet we deem the 1,500 years as more accurate than that little piece of evidence that is descripting Jesus as, coming back from the dead. And when you realize, when you actually take the time to really dwell into that and dwell into the gospel and open up your heart to just receive what it has and do the research and look at it, not only from a spiritual side, but also from a logical side, from a side that you're just dwelling into the actual historical background of it, it brings you to a place where you quickly realize, and this is where I'm going back to the identity, where everything around you is so irrelevant to that. It's so misleading. We get so lost in all of it, like so much. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I get so lost and wrapped up in my career and in baseball, and I lose that part of myself because I forget that the very essence of who I am is not baseball. I like to describe it as it's kind of like a cherry on top that the Lord's allowing me to experience, because it's something great I'm grateful for that I get to experience for this season of my life. And so when you quickly realize that, one, Jesus is who he says he is, and two, now you start applying it to the actions of how you're living your life, you quickly realize how hollow all of everything else is and how full Jesus is. And when you start living your life like that, it honestly makes your career better because it now takes the pressure off of it all. You now are living in a space where I love to describe the analogy of it's you're in a car and you're in a passenger seat and Jesus is in the driver's seat and you're just along for the ride. It's on cruise control. Like, you don't have to worry about a thing. You're just looking outside the windows and enjoying the view and enjoying your life without any care in the world. And when you can bring yourself to that point, to where the very core of yourself is resting in that, you're now living out exactly what Jesus said to live your life. You're now living your life completely dependent on him. And another analogy that I love is every room in your house, meaning, like, think about your body and your life, the very essence of who you are is a house, and it has all of these rooms and all of these different parts of your life. Every single room is occupied by Jesus. The very person of who you are is completely engulfed in who Jesus is. And when you're living your life like that, you're now putting it in something that is not wavering, and it's filling you to exactly what your spirit is yearning for each and every day.
I love that, man. I think that's a really great summary of not only a plan of action in terms of improving someone's identity or mental side of the game for sports, but I mean, a lot of analogies there you drew to just life in general. And I think that's the beautiful thing about sports psychology is these terms, theories, whatever they are, they apply to life in general, you know, facing adversity, not caring about the judgment of others. And the one thing that really stuck out that you talked about there was that like finding that one thing that's unwavering in your life and attach your identity for that to that. And I think that really challenges a lot of athletes out there to almost analyze themselves and analyze why they do what they do. If you play baseball for the fame, the money, the stats, that's not unwavering. Like that ends one day. But if you play it because you genuinely enjoy it and it's fun for you, like that will always be there, and you'll always enjoy the process because that's never predicated on somebody else's judgment of you. That's just predicated on your judgment of yourself, which if you're in a place mentally where I guess you're optimal, developed, whatever the right term is, that judgment of yourself is always going to be positive.
Yeah, no, it is. There's a verse in Galatians that talks about being like so far out of everybody else's head. Like you're not worried about everybody else. Like I'm so far out of your head, and not like whatever you do or say does not affect me. You know what I mean? And like I love that verse. And I love when people and pastors talk about it, because it's just like when you do rest in that and your life is a reflection of that, people think you're so out of your mind. And it's like, no, I'm not out of my mind. I'm just out of yours. Like, I'm not worried about yours, because like we as humans are so like dependent. And that goes back to what I was explaining of like getting lost and being dependent on like what everybody's thinking and saying about you, because you want to be accepted. You want to be given that high praise from everybody. And it's like the way that our bodies work, the way that our spirits work is contrary to that. It's like what I was saying in Galatians, like you want to be out of their mind. You want to be out of all of that, because now you can live your life from a place where like, I don't need any of that stuff. I just need to be walking with Jesus and be one with him and walking with him intimately every day. And that's it.
For any athlete out there, just as we wrap this up here, for any athlete out there that is maybe searching for that thing to identify themselves as that is unwavering, and they may listen to this or just in general, and they may not be too familiar with religion and Christianity and kind of want to get started, where would you recommend that they get started to kind of explore that avenue of their life more?
Yeah. Everybody's different. I mean, obviously, number one, you dwelling into the gospel is you never go wrong with that. And I wouldn't recommend going into the Old Testament, because the Old Testament will get you that I feel like that's from like a part of kind of maturity in your walk. It's very dense. So obviously I would directly put you into the synoptic gospels with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And you can't go wrong really with anywhere in the New Testament other than Revelation. Revelation is very dense. But if you had a book, a lot of people that I come across and I have these conversations with, a lot of them go from a philosophical standpoint where it's just like, it's hard for them to wrap their minds around believing in a book that was written 2,000 years ago. So I always love to take them to a book that was written by Lee Strobel, and it's called A Case for Christ. And it looks at it from strictly a historical standpoint, from a philosophical standpoint. And one, he's an extremely good writer, unbelievable writer. It's very easy to follow. And it's a lot of very dense information, but he makes it so easy to read. And basically it's written from a standpoint of a man who was, at the beginning of the book, he was an atheist. And basically he set out to prove his wife wrong, because his wife started getting into believing in Jesus, and he was an atheist. And he was like, I'm not going to let our marriage go down the hole for this. I'm going to prove to you that Jesus is not who he says he is. And this guy was one of the, he was a renowned like journalist in Chicago. And he would actually go out to these crimes, and he would do his own investigating on all of this different stuff to put together this whole picture and then write a piece on it for the people that would read it in the newspaper. So they would have an idea of the big case that was going on in their city. So he has this whole background of investigating all of this stuff. So he put all of his career workings and earnings into this and was like, I'm going to investigate every piece of the gospel and who Jesus says he is. And so he set out to prove his wife wrong. And basically the whole book is him through that entire process of interviewing and traveling all over the world for like 2 or 3 years of interviewing all of these huge philosophers. And not only from a bias standpoint, but he was interviewing philosophers that were atheists still. They had given their lives to studying the gospel from every angle and were still non-believers. So he picked the brains of everybody. So it's not a bias like I know a lot of people get turned off because they get into these books and like, oh, they're just all interviewing believers. So of course you're going to have a book that's all filled with, what someone's trying to point you to. So he puts you through all that. And then by the end of the book, it's one of my favorite quotes that he uses at the end of the book. And he was like, he got to a point at the end of it where he was like, it would take more faith for me to continue in my atheistic views than to just accept the fact that Jesus is who he says he is. And so like that book absolutely built my faith up even more than it ever was before. So one, that book from a philosophical standpoint, and then two, get into the gospel. Because when you open up that book and you open up your heart before you start reading the words in it, he shows up 100% of the time.
That's awesome, Jake. I think that's a good place for a lot of people out there that are maybe a little bit lost in their life and looking for some guidance or looking for that identity that's unwavering. I think you really laid out there a good step to at least get started and to start exploring that. So I appreciate you hanging around today, Jake, and speaking not only on, we talked about sports, but this is more of a podcast on the mental side of life. And I think the two go hand in hand so much. So I really do appreciate your time here, man.
No, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. You have a great rest of your day.